You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. The highway's smooth hum vanished the instant our wheels bit into that vein of raw earth. A threshold crossed. Air grew viscous in the lungs. Shadows pooled like ink beneath the skeletal creosote, and the easy camaraderie that had buoyed us across state lines evaporated into a tense quietude. Little comprehending, we knew only that our impulsive detour was twisting a journey of liberation into a nightmare destined to echo through the hollows of our years. It was conceived as the grand overture to adulthood. 5 souls, diplomas still crisp, launching ourselves across the continent before the gravity of careers pulled us into separate orbits. Months were sacrificed to the altar of planning, routes meticulously traced, peculiar monuments circled on maps, the perfect sonic tapestry woven for the miles ahead. That particular twilight found me, Elias, steering, my confidant Clara navigating beside me. Behind us, Nate and Maya were intertwined, a comfortable knot of affection, while Finn sprawled, punctuating the desert silence with threadbare jokes and pleas for roadside sustenance. We were adrift somewhere in the vast ochre emptiness of the southwest. The sun bled across the horizon, a spectacular hemorrhage of orange and rose, just as our digital guides sputtered into incoherent symbols. "Think we're officially untethered, folks," I murmured, eyes straining against the useless glow. Clara consulted her phone's map, a fragile web of lines against the encroaching dark. Should be a junction ahead, supposedly loops back to the main artery, maybe a mile, maybe 2. And then we saw it, a slender path, little more than a scar of dust veering rightward, indistinct, uninviting, yet the first deviation encountered in what felt like an eternity. "There," Nate declared from the back. "That must be the one. Take it, Elias." Hesitation prickled. An indefinable wrongness emanated from that track, a silent warning I couldn't articulate. "I don't know. Feels wrong. Maybe push on, find something paved." "Elias, come on. Where's the spirit?" Finn piped up, his voice echoing the bravado we'd all felt hours before. "It's an adventure. Worst case, we backtrack." Democracy ruled. Reluctance branded me a spoilsport. I wrenched the wheel. Civilized asphalt yielded to jarring earth, churning up a plume of ochre dust that swallowed the last vestiges of daylight. We lurched onward, time stretching, the landscape dissolving into monochrome desolation. The buoyant chatter that had been our soundtrack dwindled, starved by the oppressive stillness. Even Finn fell silent. Night had fully descended when a solitary, frantic light pricked the darkness. Closer, it resolved into a skeletal gas station, its sign a weathered ghost whispering forgotten syllables. "Civilization," Maya breathed, relief palpable in the cramped space. "Directions, maybe?" Gravel crunched like bones under the tires as I eased toward the lone pump. The place was a relic, entombed in rust and peeling paint, seemingly untouched since the mid-20th century. A single fluorescent tube hummed above the entrance, a sickly beacon for a frantic cloud of moths. "I'll go ask," I announced, releasing my seatbelt. Stay put. Stepping out, the air felt preternaturally heavy, charged. The hairs on my neck prickled. A palpable sense of being watched tightened my shoulders, though a scan revealed only emptiness. The bell above the door screamed in the stillness as I pushed inside, the sound sharp enough to make me flinch. Dim light struggled against clutter. Shelves bowed under dusty relics, sun-bleached cans, forgotten brands. Behind a scarred counter, an old man materialized from the gloom, his face a road map of arid canyons, eyes like chips of obsidian beneath wiry brows. "Evening," I managed, my voice a thin imitation of casual. "Got ourselves turned around, hoping you could aim us back toward the interstate." He didn't blink, just held my gaze until the silence stretched thin, brittle. Then, a voice like rocks grinding. "You shouldn't be out here." Ice traced a path down my spine. "Pardon." "This place ain't for your kind," he rasped, leaning slightly forward. "Turn back, now, fast as this heap'll carry you." Before the words fully registered, the bell shrieked again. Clara stood framed in the doorway, her face a stark mask of urgency. "Elias, we have to leave," she hissed. "Right now." I stumbled out after her, heart hammering against my ribs. "What is it?" She gestured mutely toward a battered pickup truck that had materialized beside our car. Two figures circled it with predatory slowness, faces obscured, peering intently through the windows. Their posture radiated sheer menace. We scrambled back into our vehicle. Nate had an arm locked around Maya, who looked brittle, close to shattering. Finn sat bolt upright, his usual languor replaced by rigid alertness. "Go," Clara breathed as the doors slammed shut. "Just drive." No further persuasion was needed. I slammed the accelerator, tires spitting gravel as we fishtailed away from the spectral station. In the rearview mirror, the two figures sprinted toward their truck. "They're coming after us," Finn stated, his voice tight as a wire. My foot crushed the pedal, urging our overloaded car along the treacherous dirt track at speeds that courted disaster. The truck clung to our bumper, its high beams searing our retinas, flooding the cabin with invasive light. "Why?" Maya cried, her voice thin with terror. "What could they possibly want?" None of us knew. 5 students, pockets thin, valuables amounting to little more than phones and snack money. This felt deeper, darker than mere robbery. A sinister undertow pulled at us. We fled through the suffocating darkness, the pursuing engine a relentless growl at our heels. Each time a curve offered momentary separation, the truck surged, its grille looming like jaws in the mirror. Then, abruptly, catastrophically, our engine coughed, sputtered, died. "No, no, please," I chanted uselessly, watching the temperature needle bleed into the red zone. We'd pushed too hard. The machine had surrendered. Powerless, I let the car drift to a halt by the side of the desolate track. The truck braked smoothly behind us, its engine settling into a low, ominous thrum. "What now?" Clara whispered, her fingers finding mine in the suffocating dark. Before thought could coalesce into action, the truck doors groaned open. 3 shapes emerged, the 2 from the station, joined by a third, broader figure who moved with an air of absolute authority. They fanned out, approaching deliberately, sealing us in. "Everybody out," the leader commanded, his voice a low growl. He tapped my window with something long and metallic. The unmistakable profile of a hunting knife glinted in the reflected glare of their headlights. Terrified eyes met across the confined space. Slowly, mechanically, we exited the car, huddling together like frightened sheep before our crippled vehicle. The men formed a loose cordon, their presence radiating a chilling possessiveness. "Well now," the leader drawled, a facsimile of a smile twisting his lips. "Looky here, 5 little lost lambs, strayed far from the fold." "Please," I choked out, fighting the tremor in my voice. "We're not looking for trouble, just lost, trying to find the highway." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound that scraped against raw nerves. "Highway? Ain't no highway leads where you're bound. See, visitors are rare out this way, and when they do show up, well, we encourage 'em to stay a while." The implication struck with the force of a physical blow. Not robbery, something infinitely worse. What ensued descended into a maelstrom of terror exceeding any nightmare's grasp. We were cattle, prodded into the bed of their truck, our pleas dissolving unheard into the indifferent desert air. They drove us deeper into the wilderness, toward a squalid compound teeming with figures, men, women, children, all sharing the same vacant feral gaze. Days blurred into an amorphous agony of captivity. We were separated, subjected to calculated cruelties designed to dismantle our spirits, piece by agonizing piece. Time lost meaning. Prayers for rescue mingled with desperate wishes for oblivion. Yet, even smothered by despair, a flicker of defiance stubbornly endured. Naivete had led us here, but it wouldn't be our epitaph. Quietly, desperately, we plotted. It was Clara who orchestrated the diversion, a terrifyingly convincing seizure that drew the attention of our jailers. Nate, quick-fingered Nate, procured a jangle of keys. Finn, no longer the jester, now silent, resolute Finn, wrestled life into one of their derelict trucks, while Maya and I neutralized the guards nearest us with frantic, brutal force. Our escape was pure pandemonium, a breathless dash through the compound's squalor, the whine of bullets slicing the air as we tumbled into the stolen vehicle. I found myself behind the wheel once more, driving with a ferocity born of primal fear, fueled by the sheer, blinding need to survive. Against all odds, we broke free. We found pavement, flagged down a passing Samaritan, and collapsed into the arms of bewildered rescue. Authorities descended, combing the wasteland, but our tormentors had evaporated, leaving only the chilling residue of their depravity. Months bled into years, stitched together with therapy sessions and the unbreakable, trauma-forged bond between the 5 of us. But some wounds scar deeper than flesh. A map spread open can still summon a tremor to my hand. Clara flinches violently at the low growl of an idling engine. Nate and Maya orbit each other now, like strangers haunted by the same ghost, their shared past an insurmountable barrier. And Finn. The laughter died in Finn, somewhere on that godforsaken track. He never jokes now. We were just 5 friends hungry for one last adventure. We stumbled instead into humanity's unlit cellar, a place where civilization's thin veneer peels away entirely. We endured, yes, but some fragment of each of us remains forever captive on that lonely desert road, caught in a perpetual twilight, whispering prayers that went unanswered for too long. So, should you ever find yourself charting a course and an unmarked dirt path beckons, promising shortcuts or untold discovery, keep driving. Some thresholds are meant to remain uncrossed, some frontiers are best left unexplored, and some nightmares once roused refuse to ever truly sleep again. Comprehension dawned, cold and sharp, when the thing hunting me began to speak with stolen resonance. It knew the cadence of human words. In that instant, the chilling realization struck. I was entangled in something far more profound and terrifying than mere misadventure. What commenced as a pilgrimage into solitude, a balm sought for a frayed spirit, had warped into a primal chase, a desperate flight from an entity that bled the edges of reality. Had I only heeded the cryptic murmurs of the town folk, their warnings against plumbing the depths of those woods unaccompanied. My name is Elias. Until 7 days passed, the most predatory thing in my life was a looming deadline, my existence a treadmill of fluorescent hum and recycled air. Seeking refuge, I carved out a week for myself, venturing solo into the sprawling ancient embrace of the highlands, imagining my chief adversaries would be the whine of insects, or perhaps the lumbering curiosity of a black bear. Such naive projections now seem laughably inadequate. The initial 48 hours unfolded as prescribed. Restorative treks through sun-dappled Viridian corridors, evenings steeped in the quiet crackle of a campfire, nights surrendered beneath a boundless diamond dust sky. Peace, profound and enveloping. But the third day arrived like a subtle shift in barometric pressure, presaging a storm. I was navigating a path less trodden, lost in the sheer luxury of isolation, when the first tendrils of unease coiled around me. A sensation began it, visceral and unnerving. The distinct feeling of being observed, that primal alert, raising the fine hairs along the nape, tightening the scalp. It started there. Dismissal was my first defense, attributing the nascent paranoia to solitude's echo chamber. Yet as the sun arced lower, the feeling didn't dissipate. It intensified, clinging like humid air. Ephemeral flickers danced at the periphery of my vision, swift, indistinct shapes, vanishing the moment I turned. Behind me, the sharp report of a breaking twig would slice the quiet, but each rapid pivot revealed only the impassive stillness of the forest. The silence itself felt watchful. Disquiet curdled into genuine apprehension. By the time shadows stretched long and I established my camp, my composure was a tattered flag in a rising wind. I fed the fire with anxious generosity, coaxing flames higher, wider, a bastion of light against the encroaching, listening dark. Ensconced in its flickering glow, wrestling the frantic pulse in my veins, I heard it, a voice threading through the twilight timber. "Hello, is anyone there?" I became utterly still, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The voice was human, yes, but unnervingly flawless, possessing a sterile quality, like lines recited rather than a genuine entreaty. "I'm lost," it persisted, the sound seeming to drift slightly. "Can someone help me?" Every nerve, every shred of instinct shrieked caution. Stay silent, don't betray your sanctuary. Yet the insidious seed of doubt took root. What if it was someone desperate, injured? Could I shoulder the weight of ignoring a true plea for aid? "Hello?" My reply emerged, a tremulous thread in the vast tapestry of the woods. "Where are you?" A pause hung heavy, pregnant with unspoken things. Then the voice returned, startlingly, from an entirely different quadrant of the forest. "Over here! Please, I need help!" Ice traced a path down my spine. Such speed, such utter silence in relocation. It wasn't natural. Scrambling upright, I swept the beam of my flashlight across the dense black perimeter of my camp. Light carved arcs through the gloom, illuminating tangled undergrowth, the stoic boles of ancient trees, but revealing no human form. "Where are you?" I shouted, voice strained. "I can't see you!" And then, the sound that shattered my remaining shreds of denial. A low, guttural rumble, utterly alien, followed immediately by the violent snapping of branches, the frantic rustle of disturbed leaves. Something immense, something impossibly swift, was crashing through the woods, directly towards my fragile circle of light. I didn't hesitate. Snatching my pack, I bolted, terror lending wings to my feet, the roar of blood loud in my ears. I plunged through the whipping underbrush, branches lashing my face, fleeing blindly into the suffocating night. Behind me, the pursuit was relentless, the sounds of its passage unnervingly close, impossibly fast for anything of apparent bulk. Then came the true horror, the sound that fractured my sanity, my own voice, flung back at me from the darkness. "Wait!" it called, mimicking my earlier shout with chilling precision. "Where are you? I can't see you." Panic surged, a raw adrenal fuel. I ran harder, legs pumping, lungs searing. This creature, this thing, was a vocal chameleon. It had dangled the bait of a damsel in distress, and now weaponized my own fear against me. Time dissolved into a blur of frantic motion, stumbling flight through an endless, lightless maze. The entity perpetually just behind. A cacophony of stolen sounds swirling around me. Pleading whispers, enraged shouts, all terrifyingly familiar, yet utterly monstrous. Just as exhaustion threatened to buckle my knees, just as my breath came in ragged, burning gasps, a glimmer appeared, faint, distant, but undeniably light. Hope, fierce and unexpected, surged through my depleted veins, granting a final, desperate burst of speed. I erupted from the tree line, stumbling onto the blessed asphalt of a road, nearly collapsing at the sight of a lonely gas station, glowing perhaps a quarter-mile distant. A frantic glance over my shoulder revealed nothing but the impenetrable, silent wall of the forest. I staggered towards the oasis of light, a wild specter in torn clothes, eyes wide with hunted terror. The attendant inside took one long look at my disheveled state, and his hand moved instinctively towards the phone. "No, please!" I gasped, struggling for air. "Help me! There's something back there, in the woods, not right." His hand paused. He studied my face for a drawn-out moment, a flicker of grim understanding in his eyes, before letting out a slow sigh. "You went up into Murmurwood, didn't you?" Confused by his weary resignation, I could only nod. He shook his head slowly. "Try to tell folks. Them woods, they ain't right. Got things in 'em older in memory." Over the ensuing hour, as the frantic hammering in my chest subsided, The attendant, Jedediah, he called himself, spun quiet tales, accounts of others, hikers and campers swallowed by the same dread, encountering a presence that echoed sounds, that whispered with the voices of phantoms or loved ones to draw victims deeper into its tangled embrace. Some name it a shade talker, Jedediah murmured, his gaze distant. Others figure it's older still, something that was rooted here long before maps were drawn, and'll be here long after we're dust. All I know for certain is, them that go looking too hard in Murmurwood, they don't always find their way back out. That night was spent huddled in the sterile brightness of the gas station, sleep an impossibility. Even as dawn painted the sky in bruised colors, summoning the courage to retrieve my vehicle from the trailhead felt like facing a firing squad. I half expected the mimic to be lurking, patient beside my car. But there was nothing. Only my sedan, exactly as I'd parked it days, lifetimes ago. The drive home was a numb transit through a world suddenly rendered suspect. Rationality scrabbled for purchase. Perhaps isolation, coupled with local folklore, had birthed a shared delusion. Maybe my own frayed psyche had projected monsters onto the unfamiliar canvas of the wilderness night. Yet a deeper, colder certainty resided in my marrow. The encounter was terrifyingly authentic, an encounter with something far more ancient and predatory than any bear or cougar. A week has bled away since my return, yet the sensation of unseen scrutiny lingers like a phantom limb. Sometimes, in the vulnerable quiet of late night, I hear them, faint susurrations from just beyond the window pane, fractured syllables, a half-formed cry for help, my own voice, thin and reedy, calling out from the encompassing darkness. I have begun to sift through the digital detritus, seeking answers, patterns. The web teems with shadowed narratives mirroring my own, stories of wanderers stalked by vocal chimeras, cryptid, some whisper, extra-dimensional entity, others posit, but concrete knowledge remains elusive, leaving only the chilling ambiguity of what it is, and the terrifying question of why. One truth has solidified. I will never again court solitude in the wild. The isolation I once yearned for now feels suffocating, pregnant with the potential for horrors unseen and unheard, until they choose to speak. And now, every unexpected noise, every casual utterance of my name, triggers a jolt of visceral fear. Is it truly a familiar voice? Or is it the echo thief from the forest, still listening, still hunting, patiently waiting to add my terror to its spectral repertoire? I possess no neat conclusions, only a constellation of anxieties and a persistent, bone-deep dread. But be warned, there are presences lurking in the deep, shadowed places of the world, entities that defy our neat categories. And should you ever wander far from the beaten path and hear a desperate call from the trees, hesitate. Listen closely before you answer. It might not be human. It might be something vast, ancient and ravenous, eager to learn the shape of your voice, ready to make it its own. And once it has your sound, who can say what nightmares it might speak? Dust motes danced in the slanted afternoon light, a silent welcome to the cavern of my new beginning, this house of tired timbers and peeling paint. I'd anticipated the usual chorus of decay, the groan of floorboards, the rasp of reluctant hinges, the scent of settled time. What I hadn't braced for was the monolith at the upstairs corridor's end, a wardrobe of dark, polished wood, its mirrored doors throwing back the gloom with startling intensity. It commanded the space, an obsidian anomaly against the water-stained paper and the warped planks beneath. Its surface, impossibly clean, held reflections too sharp, too present for such a venerable wreck. Passing it, a prickle crawled my nape, the psychic weight of an unseen gaze. I shrugged it off. Nerves, perhaps. That first night unfolded under the weight of exhaustion and unpacked boxes. My ambition? Stow clothes, find sleep. Yet the wardrobe exerted a gravitational pull on my attention. 37 years old, I'd traded the city's frantic pulse for this quiet acreage, seeking solace and a project. Savings secured, time off booked, this skeletal structure promised restoration, a task for my own hands. The day had been a blur of exertion, heaving cartons, wrestling with seized window sashes, replacing dead bulbs. Now, muscles screamed, neck stiff as old leather. Relaxation was the desperate craving. My mattress found its temporary home on an ancient bedstead in the primary bedroom. The wardrobe loomed near the foot, perhaps 6 feet distant, its mirrored gaze fixed upon me. Moving it could wait. I killed the harsh overhead glare, opting instead for a small lamp's pool of light on the floorboards beside the bed. A cool dampness permeated the air. Moonlight, unfiltered by curtains yet unhung, streamed through the panes. In the wardrobe's glass, my silhouette wavered. Drawn closer, I rapped the solid wood frame. New hinges gleamed incongruously. I swung a door open, expecting moth-eaten remnants or the sharp tang of naphthalene, but found only emptiness. Smooth wood lined the interior, releasing a faint, musty breath. Closing it, I confronted my reflection. Boxer shorts, t-shirt, eyes shadowed with fatigue, hair a chaotic map of the day's labor. I extinguished the lamp and surrendered to the mattress. Sleep claimed me, but for how long, I couldn't say. Thirst eventually surfaced, pulling me from the depths. The house held its breath, a profound quiet broken only by the distant sigh of tires on some far-off road, filtering through the thin walls. My gaze drifted to the wardrobe. Moonlight bathed the mirrors in an ethereal luminescence. My reflection stared back, but sluggishly, as if moving through water. I lifted a hand. The mirrored gesture lagged, a hesitation of a second, maybe 2, before it obeyed. A disorienting stutter in reality. I blinked furiously, blaming the lingering tendrils of sleep. Stiff knees protested as I rose. Cautiously, I approached. The delay persisted, subtle yet undeniable. My reflection shadowed my movements, perpetually out of sync. A lean forward, a 2-second pause before the mirror me leaned too. A whispered curse escaped me, inaudible, yet the air thickened with unease. My pulse quickened, a frantic drummer against my ribs. Throat tight, dry. I reached out, fingertips brushing the cool, unyielding glass. My reflection's touch arrived late. The fine hairs on my arm bristled. This defied logic, defied the simple physics of light. I recoiled. The image in the glass stepped back tardily. A swift turn, a glance back over my shoulder, the reflection pivoted with a strange, viscous slowness. Then, a new aberration seized my focus. The room behind my mirrored twin wasn't precisely my room. The perspective felt skewed. Familiar shapes, yes, but steeped in decay. Wallpaper, tattered and ripped where mine was merely faded. The bed mirrored mine in form, but its linens were darker, the mattress deeply bowed, suggesting long neglect. Stains bloomed on the walls like malignant growths, absent from my own reality. My legs locked, muscles taut. I drew a ragged breath, the air tasting stale, metallic. Leaning closer again, desperate for clarity, I tilted my head. The reflection followed, belatedly, and then I saw him, seated on the bed, within the mirror. A man, my exact replica. Same build, same tousled hair, same tired cast to the face, clad in the identical t-shirt and boxers. But he wasn't mimicking me. He was independent still, watching me with unnerving calm. Slowly, deliberately, he raised an arm, pointing towards the wall to his right. In his world, the wallpaper there hung in shreds, revealing a dark rectangular patch beneath. His expression remained impassive, eyes fixed on mine. A knot formed in my stomach, cold sweat beaded on my neck. Retreating again, I spun to examine my own wall, intact. Faded floral patterns, yes, but no tears, no patches, just plaster, presumably solid behind the aged paper. I looked back. The mirror man maintained his pointing gesture. My own reflection stood beside him now, a useless, lagging marionette. The other man remained utterly still, save for that extended arm. Slow steps carried me back to my bed. I sat, eyes riveted to the glass. My heart hammered against my ribs. My breathing sounded unnaturally loud in the charged silence. Flee the room? The thought flickered, but curiosity, laced with dread, held me captive. What infernal trick was this? I waited. After a minute stretched thin as wire, the other man lowered his arm. He rose, walked towards the mirror's surface from his side. Though silent, I perceived the faint tremor of his footfalls on the warped floorboards of his dimension. He halted inches from the glass, gaze intense. No discernible difference in his features, except perhaps a deeper weariness, a faint redness rimming his eyes. He lifted a hand, pressing his palm flat against his side of the mirror, as if testing a barrier. My own legs trembled as I stood again, a dizzying lightness in my head. I closed the distance until barely a foot separated us. His eyes tracked mine. His lips moved, forming silent words, shapes I couldn't decipher. Instinctively, I reached out, tapped the glass thrice. A dull, flat sound. The other man offered a slow, deliberate nod, then pointed once more at the wall. This time, he shifted aside, granting a clearer view. In his dilapidated room, the torn paper exposed not just wood, but a small panel inset, secured with a tarnished metal latch, a hidden compartment. My gaze snapped to my own wall, smooth, normal. I pressed my ear against the cool plaster, listening. Nothing hollow, nothing unusual. The other man stepped back, resumed his seat on the sagging bed, arms crossed. I retreated from the wardrobe, fumbled for the lamp switch. Warm light flooded the room, chasing shadows. I checked the mirror. The reflection was mine, still lagging slightly. And behind it, the other room persisted, marred and wrong. The other man still seated within its confines. Rubbing my eyes didn't dispel the vision. This wasn't hallucination. Thirst clawed at my throat again. Leaving felt risky. What might shift in my absence, but unavoidable. I hurried downstairs, flicked on the kitchen light, gulped water straight from the tap. Cold splashes on my face shocked me further awake, though my heart refused to slow. Back upstairs, nothing had altered. The silent watcher remained, patient, waiting. He was showing me something. I approached the indicated wall, scrutinizing the wallpaper with newfound intensity. At first glance, nothing. Then, running fingertips along the seam where paper met corner, I detected it. A minute irregularity, a faint crack in the underlying plaster. I tugged tentatively at the paper's edge. It tore with a soft, ripping sigh. Hesitation warred with compulsion. My house, my rules. I could tear wallpaper, yet it felt like violating something sacred. A glance at the mirror. The other man nodded once, encouragement from another reality. Emboldened, I used a fingernail to pry up the corner. The paper peeled back reluctantly, revealing not plaster, but aged wood, darker than the surrounding structure. A rectangular insert, roughly 2 feet by 1, seamlessly fitted. A small depression near one end hinted at a missing handle. I tried pulling. It held fast, back to the mirror. The other man rose again, approached his side of the glass, tapped pointedly at the spot where his latch resided. Mimicking his action, I pressed the corresponding area on my wall, felt a slight give beneath my thumb, pushed harder, a soft click. The panel sprang outward a fraction of an inch. Gripping the edge, I pulled. It opened onto a shallow recess. Nestled inside lay a small wooden box, coated in dust, unadorned. I lifted it out, surprisingly light. Inside, a sheaf of brittle papers, a heavy iron key. The documents appeared to be archaic property deeds, handwritten notes, a crude floor plan sketch. The script, elegant but faded, spoke of bygone eras. The key, cold and smooth in my palm, felt significant. I looked to the mirror. The other man observed me, his gaze sharp. Another single nod. Then he retreated, settled back onto his bed. He watched me for a long moment, making no further sign. My attempt to speak died unspoken. The barrier remained absolute. Carrying the box and key, I placed them on my bed, examining them under the lamp's glow. The papers spoke of a locked storeroom in the cellar, referenced a section beneath the stairs absent from my initial survey. The key, presumably, was the solution. What lay within? I didn't know, but the man in the mirror had guided me here. Perhaps this discovery was his purpose. A final glance at the mirror showed the twisted room, but the other man's posture seemed subtly relaxed. He stood, walked slowly to the glass once more, raised his hand, palm flat against his side. I mirrored the gesture. The glass felt cool, oddly numb beneath my touch. He leaned closer, scrutinizing my face. I saw the fine details now. A faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the shadow of stubble on his chin. My twin etched with a weariness I didn't yet possess. We stood thus, palms pressed together across dimensions, a strange, silent communion. After several minutes, he lowered his hand, stepped back, turned, and walked towards the door of his room, a door I hadn't consciously registered before, occupying the same space as mine, but opening onto a hallway steeped in deeper shadow. He paused at the threshold, cast one last look back at me, then vanished from view. He did not return. I waited, the silence amplifying, before finally killing the lamp and seeking refuge in sleep. It came fitfully, my mind a whirlwind of impossible questions. Staring at the ceiling, listening to the slowing cadence of my heart, I eventually drifted off. Morning arrived with a stiff neck and sore muscles. I rose slowly. The wardrobe first drew my gaze. It reflected my room, precisely as it was. No lag. My arm lifted, the reflection instantaneous. A pang of disappointment, oddly. Had it all been a fever dream? But no. The torn wallpaper gaped accusingly from the wall. The box and key rested solidly on the bed. It had been real. Dressed in jeans and a shirt, shoes laced tight, I carried the key and box downstairs. Beneath the main staircase, a section of wall paneling felt subtly different. The iron key grated in the lock but turned. The panel swung inward, revealing a small, cramped storeroom, thick with dust and the smell of stagnant air. My flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, illuminating cobweb-draped shelves, rusted tools, a stout metal trunk, untouched for decades. I wrestled the trunk into the light. Inside, brittle letters detailing long-forgotten repairs, unpaid bills, an inventory of vanished furniture. A tarnished metal plaque bore the house's original, long-obsolete address. Nothing overtly sinister, just a detritus of time. Yet none of it explained the mirror, the other man, the temporal anomaly. The remainder of the day passed uneventfully. I kept returning upstairs, drawn to the wardrobe. Each time it behaved. Normal reflections, perfect synchronicity. I opened and closed the doors, ran my hand along the smooth wood inside its depths. Nothing amiss. Night fell. Lamplit, I waited in bed, watching the mirrors. Hours crept by. Sleep tugged at my eyelids. Nothing. Finally, I reached for the switch. The instant darkness fell, the reflection stuttered. A fleeting lag, almost missed. I scrambled out of bed, heart leaping. Approaching the glass, the delay was back, subtle but definite. I held my breath, waiting. Seconds later, the other room bled into view. Empty this time. The bed disheveled, the torn wallpaper a familiar wound. I scanned the space, searching for him. Only emptiness greeted me. Placing my hand on the cool surface yielded no response. Only perhaps the faintest vibration, or maybe just the thrum of my own blood. I stood there a long while, but the other man did not reappear. Eventually, I switched the lamp back on. The distorted reality vanished, replaced by my own familiar, perfectly reflected room. In the days that followed, I threw myself into the house's restoration. The hidden storeroom was cleaned, its contents catalogued. The key and box found a place in a secure drawer. Each night I checked the wardrobe. Sometimes in the darkness, the other room would manifest. Occasionally, I'd catch a fleeting glimpse of the other man at the edge of the mirror frame, moving away, never acknowledging me. He never pointed again, never attempted communication. He was simply there, an intermittent presence in that parallel space. His purpose remained shrouded, a guide to the hidden compartment, a revealer of forgotten spaces, or something else entirely. I never learned. I settled into the rhythms of the old house, replaced wallpaper, sanded floors, brought in furniture that spoke of my own life, not the house's past. The wardrobe stayed. I couldn't bring myself to move it. It remained sentinel at the hall's end. Sometimes, late at night, I extinguish all the lights and watch the glass. Sometimes he appears. He stands, or sits, or paces his decaying room. Sometimes he leaves, absent for days. Fear has mellowed into a strange, watchful curiosity. I sleep easier now, understanding perhaps that his presence intends no harm. He showed me something hidden, then retreated into silence. Now, we coexist. I live here. The house is mine, imbued with my efforts, my presence. and I have the wardrobe, its mirrors holden secrets. Every so often, in the profound quiet of the night, I look into the glass and see him there, observing me from his other room, his movements perpetually adrift in time. His face, my face, remains unreadable. He is there, and so am I. It began under the cold gaze of a Monday moon, perhaps 3 weeks past, during my final watch at Cyprus Terminus. Months I'd held this late shift, embracing the profound stillness that descended after 11. My duties were a familiar rhythm: patrol the echoing platforms, inspect the slumbering equipment, ensure no stragglers lingered past closing. By 11:30, the side entrances were always secured, leaving me ensconced in the small glass booth on the main concourse until the very last official train sighed its departure near midnight. Then came the ritual of counting receipts from the automated kiosks, gathering the day's discarded remnants, a predictable cycle etched into muscle memory. But that particular night, the familiar fractured, irrevocably altering my perception of the ordinary. Precisely as the station clock struck 12, while I leaned against the booth, adrift in pre-sleep fog, a sound reached me. Not the usual metallic sighs or the low hum of ventilation shafts, but a deeper, resonant rattling from the tunnel's throat, the unmistakable weight of a train where none should be. I pushed away from the glass, peering into the cavernous dark. The tunnel's service lights cast a weak, intermittent glow, barely enough for maintenance crews navigating the shadowed depths. Squinting, leaning into the void, I saw them. Headlights, not the piercing beams of modern engines, but a dull, jaundiced yellow, flickering as if starved for consistent power. A tremor started in my chest. The timetable was clear, the last train long gone. Logic offered no explanation for this apparition. A maintenance special, perhaps? The thought surfaced, flimsy reassurance. My hand found the radio, thumb pressing the transmit key. Static answered, a harsh electronic hiss. I gave the device a perfunctory shake. A loose connection? Tried again. Only silence crackled back. Then, the piercing shriek of metal on metal, brakes protesting against the tracks. The sensation that washed over me is hard to articulate. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. My mouth turned to dust. Thoughts tangled, frantic. Impossible! My mind screamed. They'd have notified me. Yet there it was, rolling into the station, steel wheels grinding, decelerating to a halt directly before the platform. Frozen, I watched the doors glide open. The station lights above flickered violently for a moment, and in that stuttering illumination, I noticed the train's condition. Scratches marred its flanks, rust bloomed in patches, a stark contrast to our meticulously maintained fleet. This machine looked forgotten, weathered by time or neglect. A beat of hesitation, then a tentative step forward. The doors remained open, an invitation into the shadowed interior. And then I saw them, the occupants, silent figures, seated, some gazing blankly in my direction. An unsettling quality clung to their faces, a weariness etched deep, as if they carried the weight of unseen burdens. Recognition dawned slowly, chillingly. A woman, usually a cheerful presence on the afternoon commute, a clerk from a nearby office tower. But the woman on this train bore wrinkles like fault lines, her hair streaked with premature silver. She appeared decades older, though her attire seemed strangely contemporary. Across the aisle, a man whose bone structure mirrored my own neighbor, yet his hair was sparse, dark hollows carved beneath his eyes. A vice seemed to tighten around my lungs. My mind recoiled, desperately seeking rational explanations. Tricks of light, exhaustion playing havoc with perception. But as my gaze swept further, it snagged on a reflection in the window pane. My own face stared back, yet not quite mine. Older, 10 years, perhaps more, etched onto its surface. Thicker stubble shadowed the jaw. Lines creased the forehead, the hairline visibly receding at the temples. A face worn down, weathered by trials I hadn't yet endured. My throat constricted, sweat beaded cold against my spine. I stood paralyzed, caught between the urge to board this spectral carriage and the instinct to flee. The only sounds were the low thrum of the station lights and a faint, sibilant hiss from the train's open doors. With immense effort, I wrenched my gaze away, scanning the platform, praying for another witness. Emptiness answered. The station was a tomb of silence. Turning back, I found the doors still agape. My hands trembled faintly. I bit down hard on my lower lip. A few hesitant steps brought me closer, but then, with pneumatic finality, the doors slid shut. The train began to move, accelerating with unnatural swiftness, melting into the far tunnel's darkness within seconds. I remained rooted, heart hammering against my ribs, struggling to reassemble my fractured thoughts. A glance at the station clock confirmed the impossible. 12:02 a.m. Walking back to the booth felt like wading through unseen currents. I tried the radio once more. This time, a clear voice responded from control. Any unscheduled movements, late-night maintenance, negative, they assured me, the lines were clear. I mentioned seeing a train, my voice betraying none of the surreal horror. The log showed nothing, they replied curtly. The absurdity of explaining further silenced me. Ending the call, I sank into the chair, one leg jittering uncontrollably, breath coming in shallow gasps. Questions swarmed, unanswered. Knowing my shift repeated the next night, I resolved to wait, to watch, to see if the phantom would return. The following evening unfolded with a veneer of normalcy, yet beneath it, tension coiled. Every few minutes my eyes darted to the clock. By 11:55 p.m., I stood sentinel on the platform edge, gaze fixed on the tunnel's maw. The familiar quiet deepened. My lips pressed into a thin line, nerves fraying. And then, precisely at midnight, the sound returned. That distinctive heavy rattle. The tunnel light seemed to quail, dimming as the train materialized from the gloom. The same antiquated carriage, the same sickly, flickering headlights. A jolt went through me, visceral and cold. My palms grew slick. I realized my grip on the flashlight was bone-white tight. As it stopped and the doors sighed open, I saw some of the previous night's passengers, joined by new faces, all bearing the unsettling stamp of premature age, all resembling people I knew, townsfolk, commuters. Tonight, a sliver of resolve hardened within me. I stepped closer, peering into the carriage. A faint, almost subliminal buzzing vibrated in my ears, perhaps from unseen speakers, yet its source remained elusive. Taking a breath, I crossed the threshold. The doors waited patiently. My pulse hammered, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. Inside, the seats were upholstered in faded, worn fabric, small tears fraying the edges. Advertisements plastered overhead were either blank squares, or peeling palimpsests, relics of forgotten campaigns. The air hung thick with the scent of old newsprint and settled dust. Silence reigned among the passengers. Their eyes followed my movements. Again, my reflection flickered in a window, the older, wearier self from the night before. Slowly, I moved down the narrow aisle. The aged clerk offered a tired, almost imperceptible nod. The man resembling my neighbor averted his gaze. Words formed in my throat. "Who are you? What is this?" but felt too thick, too clumsy to utter. Then, the man who wore my future face rose from his seat. Clad in a simple jacket, he moved with a slight, discernible limp. He stepped into the aisle, meeting my eyes directly. "Watch the day after next Friday," he rasped, his voice coarse, strained. "Don't ignore the signals." My stomach plummeted. I opened my mouth to demand clarification, but the doors hissed shut behind me. The train lurched into motion. I swayed, grabbing a nearby pole for balance, mind racing, senses screaming. Darkness enveloped the carriage momentarily, accompanied by the shriek of brakes. Lights flickered, stabilized. Suddenly, inexplicably, the train was gone. I stood alone on the platform once more. The clock read 12:03 a.m. For the next week, the midnight train was punctual. Each visitation yielded fragments, never a full explanation. Cryptic remarks, brief instructions, sometimes just a shared look, a slow shake of the head, laden with unspoken warning. One night, the older version of Leo, my co-worker, murmured, "Check the fuse boxes on Sunday." Another evening, the aged doppelganger of a local security guard advised, "There's a storage room, faulty wiring." Always station-centric, these portents never strayed beyond Cyprus terminus. And each time, whether I disembarked or was left behind by its sudden departure, mere minutes had elapsed in the station's reality, despite the stretched, distorted time I perceived aboard. I heeded the fragmented warnings. That Sunday, meticulously inspecting every fuse box, I discovered loose connections in 2 panels, unlogged, potentially hazardous. I secured them, filed a report met with indifference. Persuading the supervisor to allow access, I examined the storage rooms, finding a hazard-labeled container dangerously close to an electrical panel. Maintenance relocated it, again with minimal fuss. A profound disquiet settled over me. My appetite waned. Sleep offered no respite, punctuated by jolts of wakefulness, the phantom hum of the train echoing in my mind, the aged faces swimming before my closed eyes. By the time the following Friday arrived, my nerves were raw wires. The warning from my older self resonated constantly. Watch the day after next Friday. Saturday. Some impending catastrophe, electrical or mechanical. That night I came prepared. Notepad, flashlight, spare batteries. I documented every anomaly. Faint, unusual odors, flickering lights, subtle vibrations humming through the concrete. At midnight, the spectral train slid into view. I boarded. Fewer passengers this time, their familiar older faces drawn tighter, bodies rigid with unspoken tension. My future self was there, a fresh cut marking his cheek, as if from a recent struggle. He leaned close, whispering urgently, "You have to pull the alarm before the meltdown starts." Ice traced its path down my spine. My mouth went dry. I tried to ask, "What meltdown?" But he merely shook his head, a gesture of grim finality. The train jolted violently, throwing me back against a seat. The doors opened onto the platform. I stumbled out, disoriented. I didn't see it vanish. One blink, and it was simply gone. Saturday, I reported for duty early, around 8 in the evening. Hours were spent in obsessive checks, wiring conduits, tunnel approaches, platform edges. Nothing screamed imminent disaster. The usual weekend bustle filled the station, thinning out after 11. By 11:45, an expectant quiet had fallen. One final walkthrough. A faint flicker near the escalators caught my eye, noted for replacement. Then, to the platform. Midnight arrived, passed, silence, 12:01, 12:02, 12:03. The station held its breath. A wave of relief washed over me, mingled with confusion. Had my earlier interventions, the tightened fuses, the moved box, somehow averted the crisis? My breathing eased. Then, at 12:15, a sharp, sputtering crackle erupted from behind a nearby maintenance access door. I sprinted towards it, wrenching the door open. Smoke curled ominously from a set of electrical panels. Shielding my mouth with my sleeve, I slammed the emergency power cutoff for that section. A bright, angry flash flared behind one of the circuit breakers. Instinct screamed retreat. My older self's words echoed. "Pull the alarm!" I bolted down the corridor, hitting the fire alarm switch hard. Klaxons blared, a deafening, visceral pulse. Red emergency lights strobed, and the overhead sprinklers hissed to life. Flashlight beam cutting through the acrid haze, I returned to the maintenance doorway. The breaker still sparked erratically, but the power cut had choked its fury. Maintenance personnel, alerted by the alarm, rushed in. One deployed an extinguisher, blasting the rebellious breaker with white foam. After a tense minute, the sparking ceased. The smoke thinned. My eyes watered. The smell burned my nostrils, scratched my throat. I coughed, tasting chemicals. The meltdown, whatever its potential scale, had been contained. The sprinklers ceased their brief shower. A replacement breaker was installed. I filed the incident report. The supervisor commended my swift action. No one spoke of phantom trains or future selves. Just a job well done. I answered their questions tersely, then retreated to the platform. I lingered until 1, but the train never materialized. The air felt heavy, stagnant. My gaze remained fixed on the dark tunnel mouth, yearning for those dim, flickering lights, but only emptiness stared back. The alarm's echo still resonated faintly in my ears, my hands unsteady from the adrenaline surge. Finally, I returned to the booth to complete my shift. The clock showed 1:12 a.m. I retrieved a water bottle from my bag, draining half of it greedily. My mouth felt like sandpaper. My body screamed exhaustion, as if I'd run a marathon, yet my mind remained stubbornly, unnervingly awake. The rest of the week, and the weeks that followed, passed in unbroken routine. Each night I stood watch on the platform near midnight, scanning the tunnel, waiting. But the train did not return. Commuters came and went on schedule, familiar faces unchanged, aging at their normal pace. Cyprus Terminus settled back into its predictable rhythm of mechanical sighs and muffled announcements. My radio functioned perfectly. The logs remained clear. Nothing seemed amiss. Yet the memory persists. Those faces in the spectral carriage, etched with hardship, burdened by years I hadn't lived. Sometimes I see their younger counterparts around town. The clerk, my neighbor, Leo. Do they feel a ripple? A sense of a path narrowly avoided? A future that flickered briefly and then closed off? I haven't shared the full account. Officially, I averted a serious electrical fire due to a faulty breaker. There is no evidence of the midnight train. Security footage shows nothing. Logs are blank. But the rust, the stale air, the weight of those gazes, those details are branded onto my memory. A low-level anxiety hums beneath the surface now, a fear that the train might reappear, bearing new warnings, demanding new actions. For now, vigilance is my constant companion. I inspect the panels more frequently, scrutinize the logs, double-check my radio, and every night as midnight approaches, my eyes inevitably drift towards the tunnel entrance, searching the darkness, just in case. I cannot say I miss those eerie visitations, the cold dread they inspired, but a part of me remains unsatisfied, yearning for an explanation that never came. Perhaps averting the meltdown was enough. Perhaps the future they inhabited has been unwritten. I don't know. I only know that I remain here at Cyprus Terminus, ready. And should that train ever roll back into the station, I'll be waiting on the platform, flashlight steady, prepared to face whatever comes down the line. That first intrusion arrived on a Tuesday, late. I recall the specific weight of the evening because my hands were submerged in the lukewarm, greasy water of the sink, battling the ghost of a baked pasta dish, when the phone screen cast a stark, anonymous glow across the tiles. Instinct, or perhaps some less definable nudge from the universe, compelled me to abandon the scouring pad, wipe my hands on my jeans, and accept the call. Yes? I cradled the device between shoulder and ear, turning back to the lingering chore. A beat of static-filled quiet, then a voice, masculine and rough, like gravel dragged over concrete. "Is Lena there?" My brow furrowed. "Sorry, no. You must have the wrong number." "Are you certain?" The question wasn't polite. It held an edge, a sliver of accusation. "Reasonably certain I know who I am," I retorted, sharpness seeping into my tone. "No Lena resides here." The connection severed abruptly. A simple mistake, I reasoned, dismissing it as I plunged my hands back into the water. The small disturbance faded almost instantly, but it was only the prelude. The calls persisted, blooming from an ever-shifting constellation of unknown numbers, always pursuing the elusive Lena. Initially, it registered as mere irritation. I'd recite my denial, disconnect, and move through my routines. Yet as days dissolved into weeks, the texture of the calls altered. The man, and a chilling certainty grew that it was the same individual orchestrating this phantom parade of numbers, became increasingly forceful, his insistence laced with something dark. "Your lies won't hold," he rasped one evening, the sound snagging me just as I'd surrendered to the quiet comfort of lamplight and an open book. "We're aware of your actions, Lena. There's no burrow deep enough." My pulse hammered against my ribs as I ended the call, a tremor starting in my fingers. This transcended a crossed wire. This felt like a hunt. Blocking numbers proved futile. New digits materialized like stubborn weeds. I procured a new number, a drastic measure, yet somehow the pursuit resumed. It was as if my fear emitted a scent he could track across the invisible pathways of the network. With the escalating calls came a corrosive paranoia. The ordinary world warped, potential menace lurking in peripheral vision, the man whose gaze lingered a fraction too long at the tram stop, possibly him. The woman whose supermarket collision apology felt overly effusive, an accomplice perhaps. My existence contracted, retreating into the dubious sanctuary of my apartment walls. One night, roughly 2 months into this siege of nerves, a text message arrived, bypassing the ritual of the ringing phone. 3 words burned on the screen, chilling me more profoundly than any spoken threat. Soon, Lena. That was the fracture point. The pressure became unbearable. Answers weren't just desired, they were necessary for survival. With fingers that felt disconnected from my will, I dialed the number back, the frantic thudding in my chest nearly drowning out the electronic pulse of the ringtone. He answered on the second chime. Decided to face it, Lena? I inhaled, attempting to anchor myself. My name isn't Lena, it's Clara Vance. I have no idea who you're searching for, or what imagined transgression haunts you, but you've targeted the wrong person. This campaign needs to end. Silence stretched across the line, so profound I wondered if he'd disconnected. Then his voice returned, lower, imbued with a chilling intimacy. Don't play games. I've observed you, Clara, or should I say, Lena. I know the building you return to, the office you occupy. I know about the faint crescent scar above your collarbone, a relic from a childhood tumble off a bicycle. I know you despise figs. I know everything, Lena. A glacial coldness permeated my veins. How? The bicycle incident was a buried anecdote, the figure version, a quirk shared only with my closest confidants. These weren't public facts. Who are you? The question emerged as a strangled whisper. I'm the consequence, he growled, the sound vibrating with contained fury. The past always collects its debts, Lena. Time to pay. The line went dead, abandoning me to a silence thick with implications. My thoughts scrambled, desperately seeking purchase on solid ground. I was Clara. That felt like the bedrock of my reality. Yet this stranger possessed an equal, unwavering conviction that I was someone else, and he wielded fragments of my private history like weapons. Sleep was an impossibility that night. I paced the confines of my apartment, each creak of the floorboards, each dance of shadows, amplifying my terror. Dawn arrived not with relief, but with resolve. This existence, lived perpetually on the precipice of fear, was unsustainable. I needed intervention. The police station hummed with a low, bureaucratic energy. Officers moving with purpose, a receptionist seemingly engrossed in her monitor. Approaching the desk felt like confessing a delusion, yet I pushed forward. How can I help? The receptionist inquired, her eyes briefly lifting. I drew a shaky breath. I need to report. Someone is stalking me. Her attention sharpened instantly, concern etching lines around her eyes. Please have a seat. An officer will be right with you. The wait stretched, each second taut with anxiety. Finally, a detective with tired eyes approached. Ms. Vance, I'm Detective Harding. Please tell me what's been happening. The story spilled out. The calls, the text, the unnerving familiarity the caller possessed. Detective Harding listened without interruption, his pen scratching notes onto a pad. When I finished, he leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Ms. Vance," he began carefully, "are you familiar with the concept of identity theft?" I nodded, baffled. "Yes, but how does that connect to this?" "Sometimes," he elaborated, "a person's stolen information isn't just used for financial gain. It can be used to construct an entirely new persona. It's conceivable someone appropriated your identity, creating this Lena. That could explain how this man knows details about your life." The explanation resonated with a terrifying logic, yet it felt incomplete. But the motive? Why fabricate that identity? And who is this man tormenting me? Detective Harding offered a slow shake of his head. "Those are questions we don't have answers for yet, but we'll investigate thoroughly. For now, document everything. Every call, text, any contact. Do not engage with him further. If he contacts you again, call us immediately. Don't respond." Leaving the station offered a sliver of relief, the comfort of having taken action, yet the unease lingered, a cold weight in my gut. As I walked towards my car, the distinct sensation of being watched prickled the back of my neck. The following days were a blur of frayed nerves and restless nights. The calls ceased, but the silence felt heavier, more menacing, like the unnatural calm preceding a violent storm. Then, on a Friday evening, draped in relentless rain, it culminated. Returning from work, juggling an umbrella and keys under the sputtering porch light, I saw him, a figure standing motionless across the street, drenched but unmoving, his focus entirely on me. Distance dissolved the details, but I knew him, not by sight, but by the chilling resonance of his voice etched into my memory. The caller. Our eyes locked across the rain-streaked expanse, a moment suspended outside of time. Then, without a word, he pivoted and melted back into the misty twilight. I remained rooted to the spot, rainwater seeping through my coat, my mind a maelstrom. Who was he? What was his purpose? And the most critical question echoing in the downpour: who was Lena? In that instant, a shift occurred. Running, hiding. These were no longer viable options. It was time to unearth my own answers. The next morning, the investigation began. I plunged into the digital labyrinth, searching for any nexus between a woman named Lena and myself. I reached out to old acquaintances, estranged relatives, anyone who might hold a fragment of this puzzle. Days yielded nothing but dead ends. Then, deep within the archives of a local newspaper's online database, I struck something. A brief article, 5 years old, detailing a hit and run. The victim, Lena Petrova. My heart seized as I absorbed the text. Lena, left comatose. The driver, vanished without a trace. But it was the description that stopped my breath. Dark hair, green eyes, a small scar marking her left shoulder. It was like reading a physical inventory of myself. Then, a memory, fragmented and hazy, surfaced from the depths. 5 years ago. A car accident, dismissed as minor, a fender bender, but involving a sharp blow to my head. The doctor's casual warning about potential memory gaps, brushed aside at the time. Could it be? The notion was staggering, threatening the very foundation of my identity. Could I be Lena? As I stared at the grainy newsprint, disparate elements began to snap into a horrifying alignment. The caller's unwavering certainty, his knowledge of details I believed were mine alone. With hands that trembled uncontrollably, I lifted my phone, dialing the number now seared into my memory. It rang once, twice, thrice. He answered. "Hello, Lena," he said. The gravel was gone, replaced by a tone almost soft, weary. "Are you ready to remember now?" I took a deep, shuddering breath. My entire world balanced on the knife edge of a revelation that promised to shatter everything. "Yes," I whispered, the sound barely audible. "Tell me who I am." As his voice began, weaving a narrative I both craved and dreaded, I closed my eyes, bracing for the impact of the truth. Clara or Lena, victim or perpetrator, the labels felt insignificant now. What mattered was the undeniable certainty that my life, the one I thought I knew, was irrevocably fractured. Somewhere in the recesses of my mind, a long-sealed door began to creak open, releasing tendrils of memory I hadn't known existed. The quest to reclaim my identity had just begun, the path ahead shrouded in shadow. But I was poised on the threshold, ready to confront whatever lay beyond, ready to discover myself. A gunshot crack ripped the velvet night. Rubber shrieked betrayal against asphalt. Our sedan pirouetted on the desolate highway, a drunken dancer before lurching onto the gravel verge, shuddering into stillness. The ensuing quiet was a physical weight, punctuated only by the frantic percussion of our lungs and the engine's metallic sigh, cooling its fever. "Eleanor! Clara!" My voice, tight. Beside me, Eleanor nodded, eyes wide pools reflecting the dashboard's faint glow. From the back seat, Clara's small, trembling assent confirmed they were shaken, yet whole. Outside, the air bit, sharp against the car's stale breath. We were adrift in a sea of blacktop and shadow, leagues from the last flickering town sign. The next, an unknown shore. A bruised moon bled pale light onto the forsaken land, stretching shadows into skeletal fingers. Kneeling by the mangled ruin of the tire, a chill unrelated to the night air crawled up my spine. This wasn't mere quiet, it was a vacuum. No insect thrum, no whisper of wind, only a profound stillness that felt less like peace and more like a held breath. The phone screen confirmed my suspicion, a stark, mocking, no service. "Seems we're marooned till dawn," I murmured, sliding back in beside Eleanor. Her face, sculpted by shadows, tightened. "Arthur, this place, it feels hollow." I recognized the vibration of wrongness she spoke of, a discordant note in the night's symphony. "We'll manage," I countered, forcing a confidence I didn't possess, aiming for pragmatism. "Water, snacks, we just need to ride out the dark." The familiar ritual of lug wrench and spare offered a fragile anchor. My flashlight carved a small stage from the engulfing blackness, the world beyond its beam, a waiting abyss. Then, twin stars bloomed on the horizon, crawling towards us. Hope flared, brief and bright. Another traveler. But the approach was unnervingly deliberate, a predator's measured pace, and the lights themselves, unnaturally wide set, perched high, suggesting something larger, less ordinary than a car. 50 yards back, it halted, a behemoth silhouette against the lesser dark, its cyclopean eyes pinning us. The engine died, yet the glare remained absolute. "Arthur?" Eleanor's voice was a threadbare whisper. "Just offering help, I expect." The lie tasted like ash. Stepping out again, ice traced my vertebrae. Silence, but for the crunch of gravel underfoot, footsteps approaching from the blind spot between the blinding beams, yet nothing stirred in the visible space. "Hello?" My call evaporated into the void. The steps persisted, measured, drawing nearer, unseen, unknowable. Raw terror clamped down. "Get in! Go!" I scrambled behind the wheel, Eleanor's protest about the spare dissolving unheard. Ignition, catch, roar. We lurched forward, the wounded wheel thumping a frantic rhythm. The rearview mirror filled with the pursuing glare, the truck surging after us like a hunting beast. Clara's small, frightened query from the back. "Papa, what is it?" "A game, Poppet," I choked out, wrestling the bucking car. "Just a fast game." It gained relentlessly, a hulking shadow consuming the road behind. Then, ahead, its twin. Another Leviathan, lights blazing, sealing the highway. Cursing, I spotted it. A barely there track, veering into the scrub. A violent turn, and we plunged onto rutted earth, bouncing savagely. They followed, engines growling, effortlessly navigating the rough terrain. A chilling certainty dawned. We weren't escaping, we were being driven. The track dissolved into nothingness, a precipice yawning before us. Brakes screamed, we skidded, stopping inches from the abyss. Behind, the truck slid into place, twin jailers, hemmed in. "Arthur?" Eleanor's voice was a ghost, trapped, utterly. As one, their lights died, drowning us in absolute black. A profound silence, then the soft, heavy thump of doors, the crunch of multiple footsteps converging on our fragile sanctuary. "Locks," I commanded, a pointless ritual against the encroaching dread. Vague forms materialized in the gloom, silhouettes against the faint starlight, shaped like men, yet they flowed with an unnerving liquid grace. A soft rapping on my glass. I flinched, turned. A face peered in, or rather, the absence of one. Smooth, polished ovoids of flesh, like sculpted blanks, with hollows where eyes should be, twin voids drinking the meager light. Eleanor choked back a scream as identical visages materialized at every window, their eyeless sockets fixed upon us. One reached for the handle. I braced for violation. Instead, a piercing, ultrasonic keen flooded the cabin, vibrating deep within bone and synapse. Vision fractured. Eleanor crumpled. Clara went limp. A leaden curtain descended, consciousness fraying. My last sight, those impassive, featureless masks observing our surrender to the unseen tide. Sunlight, sharp and intrusive, jolted me awake. We were parked neatly on the highway's shoulder, the spare tire securely bolted in place. Beside me, Eleanor stirred, blinking against the glare. Clara mumbled awake in the back. "Arthur, what?" Eleanor's voice was thick with sleep and confusion. "Must have dozed off," I managed, the words feeling alien, untrue. "Pulled over, too tired." But the night's terror surged back. The chase, the cliff's edge, the impossible faces. A dream? No. Too visceral, too deeply etched. Yet here we sat, untouched, bathed in morning's ordinary light. No trucks, no dirt track, no chasm. We merged back onto the asphalt ribbon, the engine humming a mundane tune. Yet an invisible residue clung to us, the certainty of having brushed against something vast and inexplicable, something that had examined us and, for reasons unknown, released us. My eyes flickered to the mirror, half expecting the hulking shapes to reappear on the horizon. Only emptiness stretched behind. Silence reigned in the car, a heavy blanket woven from shared, unspoken terror. The lonely highway would forever hold a different meaning, a landscape haunted by the knowledge of what might wait in its desolate reaches. Passing the sign for the next town felt like reaching sanctuary, however temporary, and a silent promise formed within me. Henceforth, only the well-lit, well-trodden paths. Some shadows we now understood held teeth, and not all watchers remained hidden. The project files had dissolved into a meaningless slurry of text and figures, swimming under the harsh glare of the desk lamp. Midnight was a distant memory. The digital clock beside Silas's monitor now bled towards 4 a.m., each minute a tiny victory against his dwindling stamina. Utterly depleted, adrift in a sea of fatigue, his only beacon was the promise of his bed, the sweet oblivion of sleep. Outside, his pocket of Elk Grove lay submerged in its customary quietude, a neighborhood defined by manicured lawns and the hushed reverence of slumber, a predictable peace Silas cherished. But tonight, something felt discordant in the familiar silence, a thread pulled loose in the tranquil weave. He had just managed to shed the weight of the day, sinking into the cool embrace of the sheets, when his phone detonated on the nightstand. The sound, shrill and alien in the profound stillness, sent a violent jolt through his exhausted limbs. He fumbled for it, squinting against the screen's malevolent glow. Unknown number. His thumb hovered, ready to decline the intrusion. Who would call at this ungodly hour? Yet a strange, unwilling curiosity compelled him to answer. H. Hello? The words scraped his throat, dry and hesitant. Silence responded, vast and listening. Then, subtly, unmistakably, breathing, slow rhythmic inhalations and exhalations, unnervingly close. Hello? He repeated, a flicker of irritation surfacing. The breathing persisted, a measured cadence in the void. And then, a voice, thin as cobwebs, sibilant. Don't go outside. Silas snapped upright, the duvet cascading around him, his heart performing a painful, erratic beat against his ribs. Who is this? He demanded, his voice sharp with sudden adrenaline. What do you want? Only the dead air answered, followed by the decisive click of a terminated call. He stared down at the dark rectangle in his hand, a cold, effervescent dread prickling beneath his skin. A prank call, surely. Some bored teenager playing games. He placed the phone back, turning from it deliberately, as if breaking eye contact could dispel the unease insinuating itself into the room. He lay back, willing his body to relax, his mind to shut down. But the whisper lingered, an insidious echo trapped within the chambers of his skull. Don't go outside. It made no sense. It was absurd. And yet, it refused to be dislodged. Sleep, it seemed, was a ship that had sailed. Defeated, Silas sat up, rubbing the grit from his eyes. 4:30 a.m. The horizon was just beginning to blush with the promise of dawn. Coffee. Perhaps the ritual of brewing coffee could impose some semblance of normalcy. As the thought formed, a sound, barely there, brushed against the silence. A soft, hesitant tap-tap at his front door. He froze, breath held captive in his chest, his pulse suddenly frantic. He lived alone. Solitude was the default state of his evenings, his nights. Visitors were daytime phenomena, never pre-dawn apparitions. His eyes darted to the phone. Silent. The knock sounded again, louder this time, freighted with insistence. Tap, tap, tap. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm as he slid from the bed, moving with preternatural quiet towards the entryway. He kept the lights off, embracing the shadows. Reaching the heavy door, he rose onto his toes, pressing his eye to the peephole's fishbowl lens. The porch light cast a lonely circle on empty concrete. The walkway stretched vacant towards the slumbering street. Nothing. A frown tightened his features, though the frantic tempo in his chest refused to ease. He flattened his ear against the cool wood, straining to hear past the thrum of his own blood. Silence. He was about to turn away, to dismiss it as an auditory hallucination born of exhaustion, when the door shuddered under a sudden, forceful pounding. Heavy, deliberate blows that resonated through the wood and into his bones. He stumbled back, thoughts scattering. Call the police? And say what? Someone knocked aggressively? He dragged in a shaky breath, fighting for composure, his hand instinctively reaching for the deadbolt. Then the whisper echoed, cold and distinct in his mind's ear. Don't go outside. His fingers halted, hovering mere inches from the lock. The memory, an invisible, impassable line. A joke, his rational self insisted. A cruel, elaborate hoax. But a shiver, ancient and primal, traced its icy path down his spine. Then, as abruptly as it began, the pounding stopped. Silence flooded the space, feeling heavier, more menacing than before. Silas waited, every nerve ending alight, listening. Nothing. He backed away slowly, his eyes fixed on the door, caught in a paralysis of indecision. And then the phone screamed again. He snatched it, his hand unsteady, the screen radiating that same stark message. Unknown number. Fury warred with a rising tide of fear. He answered, the word bitten off. Who is this? What do you want? Familiarity returned in the form of that measured, proximate breathing. Then the voice, quieter, more chillingly intimate. Don't go outside. Don't open the door. His heart felt dangerously tight in his chest. Who are you? He managed, the words strangled. What is this? No reply, but the sound of breath, cycling patiently, before the line went dead again. He stood there, phone clutched tight, pulse hammering at his temples. Ignore it? Take it seriously? It felt like a prank, yet the quality of that voice, it crawled under his skin, unsettling him on a profound level. He decided to wait them out, retreating further into the living room, his gaze never leaving the front door, listening with an almost painful intensity. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Dawn slowly asserted itself, pale light filtering through the blinds, painting stripes across the floor. He exhaled raggedly, the immediate tension easing slightly. Coffee. He needed coffee to ground himself. He was at the counter, the machine beginning its gurgling ritual, when a sharp, distinct rap, rap, rap sounded, not from the door, but from the kitchen window directly above the sink. He whirled around, heart seizing, staring at the closed blinds, a subtle warping of the light behind them, the vague impression of a shape standing just outside, motionless. He backed away instinctively, a visceral revulsion rising in him, every cell screaming avoidance. Call the police? The sheer absurdity paralyzed him. There's a shadow at my window? The situation felt utterly surreal, a waking nightmare woven from sleeplessness and terror. His phone vibrated urgently in his hand. Again. Unknown number. He felt sick, wanting only to crush the device, to silence it forever. But he answered, phone clamped to his ear, knuckles white. "Don't look," the whisper hissed, immediate, invasive. "Don't look at the window." A deep, penetrating cold radiated through his body. "Who are you?" he breathed, the question barely audible even to himself. Silence answered, pregnant with menace. Then, a fraction of a second before the click, one final, devastating fragment. "They're watching." The line died. Silas stood frozen, phone still pressed to his ear, staring sightlessly ahead. Understanding remained elusive, fragmented. Who was calling? Why? The only concrete sensation was the feeling of being observed, of something unseen just beyond the thin barrier of glass and wood, something whose attention he was forbidden to attract. He backed away from the window as if it were scorching hot, sinking to the floor, clutching the phone like a useless ward. He waited, scarcely daring to breathe, listening. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, bathing the room in bright, impartial light, yet offering no comfort, no sense of safety. Every involuntary glance towards the window brought back the icy dread, the sickening certainty of unseen eyes. Finally, spurred by a desperate need to disprove his own fear, he crept to the window, carefully parting the blinds by a hair's breadth. Nothing. The lawn lay pristine and empty. The street was quiet, ordinary. It was as if the night's horrors had evaporated with the dawn mist. But Silas knew better. The emptiness was a facade. They hadn't gone. They were merely waiting. And every night since then, the pattern repeats. The tentative knock at the door, the sharp tap at the window, the jarring ring of the phone. And always, that same sibilant voice, whispering its dreadful litany into the darkness. "Don't go outside. Don't look. They're watching." Even now, the impression of that small stone face remains indelible, sharp-edged in memory. It was a rudimentary carving, less human head than primal suggestion, hewn from rough rock. Devoid of eyes, lacking a nose, it possessed only a mouth etched into a thin, unsettling crescent, a smile that coiled something cold deep inside me from the first glance. A gift, I reminded myself, attempting a laugh that felt hollow in my own ears. Yet, from the instant I consigned it to the shelf in my living space, a creeping certainty took root. It was watching. Eyeless, yes, but its focus felt unnervatingly direct, a sensation I tried, and failed, to ignore. My world is contained within these four walls: a solitary bedroom, a living space sparsely furnished, twin armchairs, ghosts of comfort past, a low table scarred by time, a simple shelf, repository for dust gatherers and forgotten things. Receiving the effigy, I initially dismissed its oddness, placing it on the highest shelf, flank right, neighbor to a dog-eared paperback whose final pages remained unturned. Immediately, its posture disturbed, a fractional tilt forward, a subtle lean from the precipice, as if straining for a better view of the room's sole occupant. An imbalance in the carving, I reasoned, or perhaps the shelf itself, canted imperceptibly. A quick nudge confirmed its stability, or so I thought, before the rhythm of the day pulled me away. Later, cocooned on the sofa, the blue light of my phone painting my face, my gaze kept snagging on the shelf. Each time, a conviction, fleeting yet insistent, that its orientation had altered. A hair's breadth forward, then a whisper of rotation leftward. Imagination, surely. Nerves. I rose, compelled to rectify it, nudging it flush against the wall, back on the sofa. Minutes bled into silence, then the prickle crawled my forearms. I looked, turned right now, angled unmistakably toward me. My pulse quickened, a frantic bird against my ribs. The floorboards, perhaps, uneven settling? I fiddled with it again, wedging a sliver of folded card beneath its base. A fool's errand, it felt like. The television offered flickering distraction, noise to drown the silence. Sleep, when it came hours later, was shallow, shadowed by the sense of an unseen, vigilant presence sharing my space. Morning light filtered into the living room, revealing the stone face fully oriented toward the center of the space, angled out from the wall as if it had pivoted deliberately in the darkness. I stood, rubbing sleep grit from my eyes. No memory of leaving it so. Sleepwalking wasn't among my known vices. I lifted it, its surprising weight cool against my palm, turning it over. That mouth, that slight, unnerving upturn at the corners. Just an oddity, a piece of peculiar craft. Back it went onto the shelf. The urge to dismiss it warred with a nascent disquiet. Work beckoned, a refuge of mundane routine. Thoughts strayed back, unwelcome intrusions, but tasks demanded focus. Exaggeration, I told myself. A mere block of sculpted rock. Still, the impulse flickered. Donate it, bury it in a box. But a sense of obligation, a tether to the giver, stayed my hand. Perhaps tucked away, out of sight. The thought lingered, a seed of future action. Evening found me before the television again, seeking solace in manufactured drama. The statue held its post. In a lull, my eyes drifted. Overhead light sculpted the mouth, deepening the shadow, amplifying the grin. And then, a flicker, a minute tremor, like the intake of a shallow breath. My heart leapt, a knot tightened low in my belly. Volume up, gaze averted, forced away, palms slicked with sudden sweat, wiped repeatedly on worn denim. The film became background noise, unheeded, TV off. The walk to the bedroom felt long. Passing the shelf, a sideways glance was unavoidable. That forward lean again, more pronounced, or so it seemed. Mouth dry, I quickened my pace. In bed, the image replayed. A trick of light, fatigue playing on perception. Sleep was a fortress under siege. Later, sleep fractured. A faint scritch, barely audible, yet jolting me awake. Imagination, or the building settling? My pulse thrummed a frantic rhythm with each recurrence. I slipped from bed, crept toward the living room, flicked the switch. It rested on the shelf, yet closer to the edge. A crawl of goose flesh. Swallowing hard, I picked it up, turned its blank face firmly toward the plaster wall. A test. If it moved by morning, the delusion wasn't mine alone. Back to the fragile sanctuary of my bed. Dawn, the living room. A deep breath before looking. It faced outward again, grin fixed forward, defying the wall. A dizzying lurch, heat prickling my nape. Madness felt suddenly, terrifyingly close. I snatched it from the shelf, set it squarely on the coffee table, in plain sight. There I could watch it while coffee brewed, while the morning unfolded. Days passed under its silent regard. Then, a new disturbance. The smooth, featureless planes flanking the mouth began to show. Lines. Thin, shallow at first, like hairline cracks, but deepening incrementally. Grooves suggesting orbits where eyes should be. My fingertip traced them. Rough, undeniably new. Not weathering, not simple fracture. These marks felt intentional, nascent sockets clawing their way into existence. Denial became a fraying thread. The nocturnal scraping grew less furtive. Its source remained elusive. Quick entries into the living room, lights flicked on in ambush, futile. It remained static upon discovery, yet never quite as I recalled leaving it. Tilted skyward once, as if contemplating the ceiling. Another time, canted so far forward, its balance seemed a physical impossibility. My hands shook whenever I righted it, the cold stone mocking my attempts to impose order. One evening, the air thickened, pressing in. A restless energy propelled me, pacing the confines of the room. Window flung open, inviting the cool night air, a balm for tight lungs. The statue watched from the shelf, its rudimentary eye grooves seeming to track my movements. The grin looked wider, sharper. Across the room, our gazes locked, mine human, uncertain, its eyeless yet piercing. Then, not through my ears, but inside my skull, a sibilant whisper, sharp as fractured glass. Who truly watches whom, and how much more can you bear to see? I recoiled, stumbling back, breath ragged, hands trembling uncontrollably. Was I fracturing? I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing palms to temples, willing the intrusion away. Silence returned, but when I looked again, the statue's mouth seemed stretched, corners lifted higher in silent, knowing amusement. Impulse surged. Grab it, hurl it through the open window, shatter it on the pavement below. My fingers closed around the cool stone. I felt its weight, its solidity, but my arm felt leaden, inert. Fear, cold and absolute, paralyzed the action. I couldn't. Defeated, I returned it to its perch. Kitchen. Cold water splashed on my face, a temporary anchor. Music played, chores were performed, rituals of normalcy against encroaching dread, but its presence saturated the room. Trapped. The walls felt closer. Later, brushing my teeth, the hiss returned, faint, insidious, making my ears ring. Are you certain you hold the reins? Toothbrush nearly dropped. Rinse, spit, flee the bathroom. Exhaustion warred with hypervigilance. Bed offered no respite. Thoughts churned, nerves frayed thin. Lights out. Darkness pulsed with imagined sounds. Sleep, when it finally claimed me, was a thin, troubled veil. After midnight, a definite sound. Low, dragging friction from the hallway. My eyes flew open, pulse hammering. Sitting bolt upright, straining to hear. The scraping persisted, then a soft thump. Out of bed, slow steps toward the door, easing it open. Living room steeped in shadow, streetlights casting long, distorted shapes. The shelf, empty in the gloom. A few steps further, floorboards groaning betrayal. My breath hitched, there on the coffee table. Angled toward me, the shadowed sockets aimed at my chest. That grin, mocking my terror in the dim light. My hand found the switch. Light flooded the room, stark and revealing. The change was undeniable. The eye grooves, deeper now, jagged, as though clawed from within. Raw. My stomach clenched, sweat beaded on my forehead, and on the coffee table's polished surface, fine scratches, tracing a path. Evidence it had moved, left its mark. Its features were actively, impossibly changing. Picking it up again, my fingers probed the nascent sockets, rough stone, freshly disturbed, and a faint, inexplicable warmth radiating into my fingertips. Not heat, exactly, but a subtle energy, a thrum of something nascently alive. My heart pounded against my ribs. Words escaped me, whispers of disbelief. Impossible, just tired. I set it down beside me on the sofa, watching, waiting for a sign. Silence, stillness. Enough. I carried it to the hall closet, placed it on the top shelf, tucked behind forgotten shoes, closed the door, hands still unsteady, but a fragile sense of containment settled over me. Back in the living room, listening. Silence, blessed silence. For now. The calm felt precarious but real. I decided sleep, if it came, would be on the sofa. Vigilance was the new normal. Morning, stiff neck, instant anxiety, rushing to the closet, door still closed, reaching for the knob, heart leaping. Opened it, still there. A wave of relief washed over me, potent but incomplete. The air still felt charged. For days it remained entombed in darkness. Yet the faint nocturnal scraping persisted, muffled sounds from the hallway. Earplugs offered little defense against the sense of movement nearby. Nerves remained perpetually frayed. Each check revealed further change. The eye grooves widening, edges crumbling as if worked from inside. The grin stretched, a rictus of silent mockery. Home became a place I dreaded returning to. The air felt thick, suffocating. Late nights at the office, detours to nowhere, anything to delay crossing my own threshold. Futile, of course. Its presence permeated the space, seen or unseen. The memory of the whispers echoed, a pressure building against the inside of my skull. One evening, near the baseboard in the hall, more scratches. Faint lines trailing from the closet door toward the living room, etched into the paint itself. My breath caught. Rubbing futilely with a cloth confirmed their permanence. The image seared my mind. The stone dragging itself, scraping along the wall. I retreated to the sofa, sank down, legs trembling. The pressure in my head intensified, the precursor to the whisper. Mouth dry, hands clenched. Throw it out, but the fear of consequence, of it returning, of what it might do if provoked, held me captive. I sat there, shaking, trapped between the known horror within my walls and the unknown terror of casting it out. For now, it waited in the dark closet, its half-formed eyes fixed on the door, and I waited in the living room, staring back, each heartbeat a heavy drum against the silence. Only the whisper of my own soles on polished concrete broke the cavernous silence. Viridian dynamics after dark isn't just quiet, it was watchful. Tonight, the metallic air hummed with a peculiar stillness, a held breath presaging storm. Little did I know that dawn would find me a hunted man, clutching a truth lethal enough to silence me permanently. They called me Elias. 6 months I'd haunted these halls, custodian of the graveyard shift at Viridian. The pay kept starvation at bay, the solitude a fertile ground for the novel gestating in my mind. By night, Viridian transformed, a labyrinth of dormant assembly lines, echoing chambers, and shadowed storage bays, most slumbering in profound stillness. The shift began predictably, the punch clock's indifferent click, a mumbled exchange with the departing day supervisor, the familiar rhythm of mop and pail. But as the clock crawled past 2, near the sequestered executive wing, a zone typically sepulchral after hours, a low murmur disturbed the quiet. Voices, urgent whispers leaking from where only silence should reside. Prudence screamed retreat. Fascination propelled me forward. My buffer trailed uselessly behind me. Closer now, fragments snagged on the air. Consignment due tomorrow. Cannot afford scrutiny. Ensure all variables are neutralized. A cold fist clenched around my heart. This was no late-night budget review. I risked a glance through a sliver of open doorway. 3 figures clustered beneath the cone of a desk lamp. Magnus Holloway, Viridian's imposing CEO, Silas Thorne, head of security, face like chipped granite, and a third, gaunt man I'd occasionally seen drifting through the facility, Mr. Kyle. They studied schematics unfurled across the desk. Holloway's finger stabbed at a section. Entry point here. The night staff are oblivious. Cale's thin lips barely moved. Their loyalty is guaranteed? Thorne chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Generously compensated for their discretion, should anyone develop inconvenient curiosity. Well, industrial settings are prone to unfortunate mishaps. Perhaps a floorboard groaned under my weight. Perhaps I drew breath too sharply. Whatever the betrayal, 3 pairs of eyes snapped towards the door, locking onto mine. A frozen tableau shattered into pandemonium. "Secure him!" Holloway's command cracked like a whip. Adrenaline surged, vaporizing thought. I spun, plunging into the familiar gloom of the corridors, the frantic tattoo of my heart, vying with the heavier, pursuing drumbeat of their footsteps. They were gaining, but this metal and concrete beast was my domain by night. I knew its arteries, its hidden capillaries. Down a service corridor, through the echoing void of Storage Bay 7, scrambling up a narrow maintenance ladder, sheer terror fueled limbs already screaming in protest. I exploded into the cavernous main assembly hall, a cathedral of dormant titans, presses, robotic arms, conveyor belts slumbering under dust sheets. I wove through the metallic forest, mind racing to connect the sinister fragments. Consignment, neutralized variables, mishaps, illicit cargo, silenced witnesses, deadly implications, escape, police. But my phone lay useless in my locker miles away, and Thorne would have already sealed the exits, trapped. Then, hiding behind the bulk of a hydraulic press, gasping for air, inspiration flickered. The omnipresent eyes of Viridian, security cameras. They saw everything. If I could reach the control room, retrieve the recording of that meeting, I'd have irrefutable proof. But the security hub lay across the factory floor, and the sounds of the hunt were drawing nearer. Stealth was paramount. Melting into the deeper shadows, I became a ghost in my own workplace, leveraging my intimate knowledge of the Night Watch's predictable patterns. Every clank of distant pipework, every sigh of the ventilation system sent jolts through my nerves. Each pool of darkness felt pregnant with menace. Yet, meter by painstaking meter, I closed the distance. The security office door yielded to my janitorial master key, a small irony. Inside, a constellation of monitors displayed the factory's vacant perspectives. On one screen, starkly illuminated, Holloway, Thorne, and Cale, methodically sweeping the corridors, searching for me. Trembling fingers navigated the interface, locating the archived feed from the executive wing. There it was, the meeting. I plugged in a cheap USB drive, initiating the download. Each percentage point crawling across the progress bar felt like an eternity. The transfer completed. Just as I pocketed the drive, my fragile shield against oblivion, muffled voices echoed from the hallway. Alarmingly close, My eyes darted around the cramped room. The air vent, high on the wall, grill secured by simple screws. Hope flared. As my fingers worked frantically at the fastenings, the door slammed open. Silas Thorne filled the frame, pistol leveled, his face a mask of glacial rage. "Nowhere left to run, Elias," he rasped. "Should have kept sweeping floors." Primal instinct surged. As the gun barked, I threw myself towards the opening, the displaced air of the bullet kissing my cheek. I scrambled into the tight, metallic throat of the ductwork, the roar of the pistol and Thorne's enraged shouts receding as I wormed my way deeper into the building's hidden passages. Time dissolved in the suffocating dark of the ventilation shafts. I navigated by feel, the metallic chill seeping into my bones, every echo magnified, my skin abraded against unseen edges, breath catching in the stale air. Forward, only forward. Stopping was unthinkable. Faint light beckoned. I pushed through a final grate and tumbled onto the graveled expanse of the factory roof. The night air, cold and sharp, was a physical blow after the claustrophobia below. Below sprawled the city's indifferent glitter. Freedom seemed tangible, yet impossibly distant. Then, the clang of the roof access door wrenched open behind me. They knew, cornered again. One desperate option remained. The adjacent warehouse roof lay separated by a chasm that yawned terrifyingly wide in the gloom. No time for calculation. I sprinted and launched myself into the void. For one heart-stopping second, there was only air beneath me. Then, impact. Jarring, painful, but solid. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline masking the pain, and fled across the neighboring rooftops. Instincts honed by reckless teenage years guiding my leaps. The sounds of pursuit and sporadic gunfire fading behind me. The descent from the roofs into the labyrinthine embrace of the pre-dawn city remains a fragmented memory, a desperate scramble down fire escapes, fleeting sanctuary in garbage-strewn alleys, the constant sickening certainty of being watched. As the first grey light bled into the sky, I found myself standing before the impassive facade of the Central Police Precinct. Filthy, trembling, bruised, but breathing. I staggered inside, the small USB drive clutched in my fist like a holy relic. What followed was a maelstrom. Depositions, federal agents, glaring news cameras. The drive yielded everything. Not just the damning conversation, but tendrils reaching into a vast smuggling network woven through Viridian dynamics. Holloway, Thorne, Cale, and others fell. The corporation buckled under the scandal, and I, Elias, the night janitor, was improbably cast as the catalyst, the accidental hero. Though the storm passed, its chill lingered. Normalcy felt brittle, easily shattered. The hunter's instinct, honed during those desperate hours, refused to sleep, translating every sudden noise into threat, every unfamiliar face into potential menace. I took the offered reward money and vanished, seeking anonymity elsewhere. There, finally, I exorcised the demons onto the page, weaving my terror into a thriller that, against all odds, found an audience. Even now, in the deepest quiet of the night, the ghost of pursuing footsteps sometimes brushes against my hearing. The icy grip of fear momentarily returns. But then I remember the crawl through darkness, the leap into nothingness, the survival. Viridian dynamics taught me about the rot that can fester beneath polished surfaces. Yes, but it also revealed a resilience within me I never knew existed. That knowledge, hard won in the crucible of fear, remains my most enduring reward.